In this portion, we'll discuss streptococcal infections. So these are gram-positive organisms that are spherical in shape. They are arranged in long chains. They do not form spores. We will see that some of them have the ability to form a capsule. They are facultative anaerobes, and they do have a peroxidase system. This is what a streptococcal bacteria would look like under a microscope. Again, they are purple, so they're gram-positive. They're round in shape, and they are arranged in a thread-like appearance. So how do we categorize streptococcal into subgroups? There are two different ways of doing this. The first way is called the Lancefield grouping technique, where they are categorized according to the carbohydrate that is found on the cell wall of these microorganisms. There are about 20 groups, and each group gets a letter, so they are A, B, C, and you go down the alphabet. The first group, or group A, Streptococcus infections, these are the ones that mostly cause severe streptococcal infections. Okay, so the group A Streptococci are the ones that cause severe strep infections. So that's one way of classifying. Again, the Lancefield using the carbohydrate that is on the cell wall. Another method of classification is to culture the strep on blood agar and then look for hemolysis. So some strep have the ability to completely hemolyze blood, and these are known as beta hemolytic strep, while others can only hemolyze a little bit, and they lead to incomplete hemolysis, and these are known as alpha hemolytic. So I'd like to show you an image so that you can understand the difference between this complete hemolysis and incomplete hemolysis. This right here is beta hemolysis or complete hemolysis, where again, the strep was spread on blood agar, and you can see that the blood was completely, those red blood cells were completely destroyed, and you have more of a clear or yellow streak here, while in the incomplete or the alpha hemolysis, it is more of a greenish streak. Okay, so here when it's clear, this is complete hemolysis. We call this beta hemolysis. Incomplete gives you more of a greenish color due to the incomplete hemolysis of the RBCs, and that is known as alpha hemolysis. Now, here are some species of streptococcal infections or streptococcal bacteria. I'm not going to mention all of them. I just want to mention some of the ones that are more clinically relevant. So there are Streptococcus pyogenes. These are the ones that usually live in the throat, and these are the ones that usually also cause throat infections. They can cause skin infections as well, and a disease called scarlet fever, which we're going to talk about in this recording. Another strep is Streptococcus agalacti, and this is found, well, related to lactose. Okay, so it's found in cow udder, and that is why the milk that we get out of cows has to be pasteurized so we can get rid of pathogens, including the Streptococcus agalacti. It is also found in the human vagina, and that is why it can lead to neonatal infections. Other ones that are important clinically are the Streptococcus sanguinis and mutans. Both of these are found in the oral cavity, and if they overgrow, they could lead to dental cavities, and they can even invade into the bloodstream and lodge themselves onto the valves, leading to endocarditis. Streptococcus pneumoniae, this can lead to, well, from the name, it's telling you that it can lead to bacterial pneumonia if it lodges itself into the lungs. So this right here is the group A beta hemolytic streptococcus infection known as Streptococcus pyogenes. So Streptococcus pyogenes, pyo means plus. So this is a very aggressive kind of strep infection that it usually happens in the throat, and it can cause this kind of redness. Here you can see that the lymph nodes, sorry, not the lymph, the tonsils are enlarged, and you could see all of the white pus that is formed, hence the name pyogenes, because it leads to the formation of pus. But although Streptococcus pyogenes is technically part of the normal microbiome, but there are several virulence factors that can eventually lead to the overgrowth of these bacteria that leads to the development of a strep throat. So let's take a look at these virulence factors of Streptococcus pyogenes. So these are found on this specific kind of strep, not all strep infections. So Streptococcus pyogenes, again responsible for strep throats, has 5 different kinds of virulence factors. There is the C carbohydrate. C carbohydrate is the carb that is found in the cell wall of this bacteria. It prevents the bacteria from being dissolved by the lysosomal enzymes. So if you guys remember the macrophages, and when a macrophage engulfs a bacteria through phagocytosis, it was the lysosomal enzymes that digested that bacteria. Well, the C carbohydrate that's found in the cell wall of the Streptococcus pyogenes prevents these lysosomal enzymes from digesting it. There are the fimbriae, and the fimbriae help in the adherence of pyogenes to the epithelial cells of the skin or the pharynx. There are M proteins. M proteins are these spiky proteins that are found on surfaces. This also prevents phagocytic cells from phagocytosing the pathogen. It also helps in sticking to different surfaces. So I want to show you what it looks like. These right here, these are the spiking proteins that are coming out of the cell. And again, it helps in adherence and preventing phagocytosis. And as I mentioned, that some strep have the ability to make a capsule. So Streptococcus pyogenes is one of those. The capsule, as we know, protects the microbe from phagocytosis. It is sticky, so it helps in sticking to surfaces. And something very interesting is that the capsule is made from the same hyaluronic acid that we make, and that is why our immune system doesn't think that there's a foreign body and doesn't really respond to that capsule because it thinks that it is a self-antigen. Now, the last of the virulence factor is this C5a protease enzyme. So this protease enzyme is an enzyme that digests protein, and it digests the C5a protein of the complement system. So if you remember the complement system, we said it was a cascade or a collection of proteins, and we would activate them, either through the classical or the alternative pathway. And when one protein is activated, it would activate the next. So you activate C1, which would activate the next one, and so on, kind of like that domino effect. Well, the C5a protease will destroy the 5th complement in this series, and therefore, the whole complement system will basically disintegrate. There's still more. Okay, so the Streptococcus pyogenes have lots of toxins and enzymes that are secreted out of the cell. So these are all extracellular toxins and extracellular enzymes. So the extracellular toxins are streptolysin. Streptolysin is a hemolysin, but because it's secreted by strep, we call it a streptolysin, and it leads to the hemolysis of red blood cells. There is an erythrogenic, or also known as a pyrogenic toxin. The erythrogenic toxin is called that because it leads to a red skin rash. It's also known as the pyrogenic toxin because it causes a fever. And another toxin is the superantigens. These superantigens, as we've discussed previously, can lead to massive overstimulation of the immune system. Now, some of the extracellular enzymes are streptokinase that digests fibrin clots, and this helps the spread of the infection. Hyaluronidase breaks down connective tissue, which also helps in the spread of the infection. And then there is DNase that will digest and destroy DNA. So you see that Streptococcus pyogenes has lots of different virulence factors, all of these 5 in the table, these toxins, and these extracellular enzymes. Okay. So what is the epidemiology and pathogenesis of Streptococcus pyogenes? Well, humans tend to be the only significant reservoir for this bacteria. A lot of times people are just carrying it without a disease, without any signs or symptoms, and unknowingly transmit it to others through droplets, through fomites like doorknobs, pens, shared laptops, and so on. Kids tend to be the most prominent group that are affected by Streptococcus pyogene infections, especially of the skin and throat infections. Because of these, it can also be spread through the bloodstream to other organs, and there are possible they're not infections, but they are complications of the infection if the infections are not treated properly. Okay. So let's take a look at the skin infections. Well, impetigo, which is the same thing that could have been caused by staph, can also be caused by strep. This is usually happens mostly in school children, kind of like an epidemic where a whole classroom, and usually in the pre-K or kindergarten, so younger age children have this. And sometimes it happens because of the overcrowding, poor hygiene. These are the things that would help the spread of that infection. Another skin infection is called erysipelas, where the pathogen enters through any broken skin and it spreads to the underlying dermis and to the underlying subcutaneous tissue. So I want to show you pictures of both of these. So here, this is an image of impetigo, and you can see all of the crusting that is happening because of the infection. This right here is an image of erysipelas, where you can see that there is destruction of the dermis and the underlying subcutaneous tissue. This is another skin disease. It's called necrotizing fasciitis. It is also known as the flesh-eating disease. And this tends to happen because of those enzymes that we talked about. Hyaluronidase enzyme is one of them that helps the spread of that infection into the muscles and into the underlying bones. Here you can see the throat infection again that we've seen previously. This is a strep throat. I kind of put a healthy throat here so you know what a healthy one would look like, and can be able to compare it with these enlarged tonsils, showing all of that white pus on there. So those are throat infections and skin infections. Okay, so let's talk about systemic infections that can be caused by strep. There is scarlet fever. So scarlet fever is caused by a strain of Streptococcus pyogenes that has a prophage coding for erythrogenic toxin. And remember, erythrogenic toxin is that toxin that causes a red skin rash. If the toxins get into the bloodstream, that's known as septicemia. Streptococcus can also cause a pneumonia. It can also lead to streptococcal toxic shock syndrome. Okay. So now here, this is scarlet fever. Okay, this shows you some of the signs and symptoms of scarlet fever. Something that is very characteristic with these patients is that they have these sometimes called slapped cheeks. So it does look like these patients were slapped on the cheek because they've got this redness on both sides. And remember, it was the erythrogenic toxin that led to that. You can see this is definitely very diagnostic, basically, of scarlet, that they have what is called a strawberry tongue. So you can see all of these little dots that have developed on the tongue because of the strep. Here you can see the skin infection, so not the skin infection, I mean the skin rash. And I put both of these pictures because a lot of the textbooks describe the skin rash as red, but that really depends on our skin color. So what seems red in a lighter skin color would not be red in a darker skin color. And so it's really important to be able to recognize the rash, whether, regardless of skin color. So what are some long-term complications? So these long-term complications are not caused by the strep itself. It was that the strep infection went undiagnosed or was not treated properly, and the person developed antibodies against strep, which is a good thing, but these antibodies start to attack our own tissue, okay, because the part of the antigenic epitomes of strep look a little bit like our own. So we'll see that these patients can develop, weeks later, they can develop a rheumatic fever. That's when these antibodies attack and destroy the endocardium, including the valves. So you see here that the valves have been destroyed. Or they can attack the kidneys, the glomeruli of the kidneys, leading to acute glomerulonephritis. And highlights the importance of properly diagnosing and treating a strep infection. So a concept check: which of the following is not a possible complication of strep throat? Is it rheumatic fever, acute glomerulonephritis, or otitis media? So if you answered otitis media, you are correct.